Chapter 1. The Endless Hallway of Forgotten Memories. The dream always began the same way. A quiet hum in the distance, almost like a song with no words, pulling you forward into a space that felt both familiar and unknown. The air held a weightless quality, as if you were floating, yet every step you took was grounded, your feet pressing against a floor that seemed to stretch endlessly beneath you. The hallway was long, impossibly so. Its walls were lined with doors, old, wooden, and slightly ajar, each revealing glimpses of forgotten moments. Some doors led to places you vaguely recognized: a childhood bedroom, an empty park at dusk, a library filled with books that had no titles. Others opened into spaces that defied explanation: floating staircases that spiraled into the sky, an ocean shimmering beneath a ceiling of stars, a vast desert with no horizon. As you walked, you felt a sense of purpose, yet you couldn't remember what it was. Something called to you from beyond the hallway, urging you to move forward, to open the right door. The hum grew louder, its melody wrapping around you like a whispered secret. You reached for a door slightly different from the rest, its frame darker, its edges flickering as if resisting reality. Pushing it open, you stepped inside and found yourself in a room without walls. Time slowed. The floor beneath you felt like soft sand, shifting slightly with your weight. The air was thick with a scent you couldn't place, something warm and nostalgic. Shapes flickered at the edges of your vision, memories perhaps, but they slipped away before you could hold on to them. You turned, expecting to see the door you came through, but it was gone. In its place, only an expanse of mist stretched before you, swirling like thoughts just out of reach. A voice, calm and distant, echoed from within the fog. It didn't speak in words, yet you understood it. Are you looking for something, or are you waiting to be found? The question settled deep within you, stirring something familiar yet ungraspable. The hum softened, fading like a dream upon waking. You blinked, and suddenly, you were standing back in the endless hallway, the door before you shut tight, as if it had never been open at all. The dream would end soon, you knew that. And yet you also knew that the hallway would be waiting for you the next time you closed your eyes. The air around you grew heavier, as though the dream itself resisted your departure. You felt an urge to keep walking, to find the door that would finally reveal the truth hidden within these endless halls. The deeper you went, the stranger the hallway became. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting between shades of darkness, the doors growing taller, thinner, some even bending at odd angles. The humming continued, but now it felt more like a vibration within your chest rather than a sound in the distance. You placed your hand on the nearest door, and it was warm beneath your fingertips. A deep breath, a quiet exhale, and you pushed it open. Inside, the room was vast, an empty cathedral of forgotten pillars stretched up into infinity, their tops vanishing into a ceiling of stars. The floor was smooth, like polished glass, reflecting a version of yourself that didn't quite match. You knelt, touching the reflection, and ripples spread outward like waves on water. A figure emerged in the mirrored surface, stepping forward with slow, deliberate grace. It was you, yet it wasn't. Their face shifted, flickering between ages and expressions, memories bleeding into one another. "What have you lost?" the reflection asked. Its voice neither male nor female, old nor young. "Do you even remember what you came here for?" You opened your mouth to answer, but the words would not come. Instead, the cathedral shuddered. The pillars trembled, the stars above flickering like dying embers. The reflection reached forward, its fingers brushing against yours, and in an instant the world cracked apart. You were falling, weightless yet heavy, spinning through the nothingness of forgotten time. The humming returned, a familiar anchor in the void, pulling you back towards something you couldn't name. When your eyes opened, you were back in the endless hallway, but it had changed. The doors were gone. The walls stretched endlessly in both directions, the floor beneath you now a shifting mosaic of memories, faces, places, emotions, all blending into a tapestry of the unknown. The humming had become words now, whispered on the edges of consciousness. Wake up or keep dreaming. The choice has always been yours. You took a step forward, the floor shifting beneath your weight, and ahead of you, a new door appeared, tall, imposing, and waiting. Chapter 2. The mirror that reflected yesterday's dreams. The dream always began in the same place, a dimly lit room, its walls fading into shadow. There was no door, no windows, only the steady hum of something unseen, something just beyond the edge of awareness. The air was thick, almost tangible, as if the dream itself had weight, pressing gently against your skin. And in the center of the room, standing alone in the quiet, was the mirror. It was tall, impossibly so, its frame carved with patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. The glass was dark, not quite a reflection, but something deeper, something that breathed and moved in ways you couldn't quite understand. As you stepped closer, your own reflection emerged from the darkness, slow and hesitant, as if it had been waiting for you. And yet, something was wrong. The figure in the mirror stood just a little too still. The eyes, though identical to yours, held something unreadable, something just beneath the surface. You lifted a hand, and the reflection followed, but not exactly. A delay, a hesitation, like a thought unfinished. Then, a shift. The mirror shimmered, a ripple spreading across its surface, like a stone dropped into still water. And for a moment, just a breath, you saw something else. A glimpse of another room, another time, something familiar yet unreachable. And then it was gone. The hum in the air grew softer, wrapping around you like a whisper. The mirror was waiting. A deep breath, a quiet exhale. You reached out. Your fingertips met the surface, not cold, not glass, but something softer, something that pulled at the edges of your mind. A warmth spread through your hand, traveling up your arm, sinking into your chest. And then, you were no longer standing in the room. The shift was seamless, as if you had simply blinked and found yourself somewhere new. A place that felt both familiar and unknown, as if you had been here once long ago, in a dream you had forgotten. The world around you was vast and endless, a sky without stars stretched above, swirling with faint colors that pulsed like distant memories. The ground beneath your feet was smooth, like polished stone, reflecting the world in a way that was almost, but not quite, real. Ahead, the path split into two. To the left, a long corridor lined with doors, each one slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. The air there felt heavy, filled with something unspoken, something waiting. To the right, a quiet garden bathed in soft golden light. The scent of rain and old books lingered in the air, the leaves whispering in a breeze that did not move. And behind you, the mirror stood unchanged. A silent doorway between what was and what could be, but your reflection was no longer your own. It watched you with an expression you didn't recognize, eyes filled with something unreadable. And then, slowly, it lifted a hand, not to mirror your movements, but to reach forward, pressing against the other side of the glass. A voice, soft and distant, drifted through the air. Do you remember now? The question settled into your mind like a thought you had always known, but never spoken aloud. Did you remember? The garden, the hallway, the doors, they were choices. They had always been choices. And yet, something told you that no matter which path you took, the mirror would always be waiting, waiting for the moment you truly understood. The dream shifted again, pulling you deeper. The hum in the air grew softer, the world around you stretching and folding into itself. And somewhere, in the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed. Not yours. Someone else was here, waiting. Chapter 3. The door that only opens in dreams. The dream felt different this time. You weren't simply floating through a passing thought or wandering the edges of memory. This was something else, something waiting. The air carried a softness, like a whisper just beyond hearing. The world around you pulsed with quiet energy, shifting and folding in on itself, as if it were alive. And ahead of you, standing impossibly tall, framed in shadow, was the door. It was unlike any door you had ever seen. The wood, dark and smooth, held no handle, no keyhole, only the faint outline of something carved deep into its surface. Symbols, shapes, whispers of meaning that tickled the edges of understanding but never quite revealed themselves. The longer you looked, the more they seemed to move, shifting and rearranging as if responding to your presence. You had seen this door before, not in waking life, not in a place you could name, but in dreams, long winding dreams that faded the moment your eyes opened, leaving only the ghost of an image behind. The door had always been there, waiting, and now for the first time, you were standing in front of it. A deep breath, a quiet exhale. You lifted your hand, fingers hovering just inches from the wood. The dream hummed around you, urging you forward, pulling you closer to something unseen. But the moment your fingertips brushed against the surface, the world shifted, not violently, not suddenly, but seamlessly. As if you had stepped into another layer of sleep, sinking deeper into the unknown. The door was no longer in front of you, it was behind you, shut tight, locked without ever having needed a key. And ahead of you, a corridor. Endless. Dimly lit by an unseen glow, stretching in both directions, lined with doors identical to the one you had just touched. Some were slightly ajar, revealing slivers of light, fragments of forgotten places. Others remained shut, their surfaces untouched, waiting. Something about this place felt familiar. You had walked this hallway before, hadn't you? A memory stirred, soft and fleeting, just out of reach. You tried to hold on to it, but the moment you did, it slipped away, like mist dissolving in the morning light. Somewhere in the distance, footsteps echoed, slow, measured. Not yours, you weren't alone here. The realization sent a quiet shiver through you, not fear, not quite, but something close. A presence was near, just beyond the curve of the hallway, just out of sight, watching, waiting, but for what? You turned your head, glancing at the doors nearest to you. Each one bore a different mark. Symbols you didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. They weren't just doors. They were choices, memories, dreams. Some belonged to you, others didn't. A voice, soft, distant, whispered from somewhere unseen. Which one will you open? The question settled deep within you, as though it had been waiting to be asked. Your fingers brushed against the nearest door, warm to the touch, familiar, a pull, an invitation. Another breath, another step forward. The dream was leading you somewhere, and the door, it was waiting to be opened. Chapter 4. The door that shouldn't exist. The dream always began the same way. A quiet corridor, stretching endlessly in both directions, dimly lit by a source that could never be found. The walls were aged, their surfaces cracked and peeling, as if time had forgotten them. The air was heavy, filled with a scent that was neither comforting nor entirely unpleasant, a mix of aged wood and something faintly metallic. It was in this place that the door appeared. It had no reason to be there, no architectural logic that could explain its presence. It was simply there, standing in defiance of reality. Dark oak, impossibly old, with a handle that was warm to the touch, as if it had just been used. Every time I hesitated before reaching for it, a deep, unshakable sense that opening it would change everything. And yet I always did. Beyond the door, the dream never followed a pattern. Some nights, I found myself stepping into endless fields of swaying grass beneath skies that rippled like water. Other times, I was met with towering halls of stone, their surfaces etched with words I could not read, but somehow understood. There were rooms filled with objects I had never seen, but felt a strange, undeniable connection to, as if they had belonged to me in another existence. And then there were the nights when what lay beyond was far less welcoming. A vast, dark expanse, silent but not empty. I could feel the presence of something watching, something that did not belong to any world I knew. The air would grow cold, my breath visible even in the absence of light. My heart would pound as I strained to see what waited in the void. And always, just before I could discern its shape, I would wake. I tried to tell myself they were only dreams, but then the door began to appear when I was awake. At first it was subtle, a fleeting impression in the corner of my vision, gone the moment I turned to look. Then it became undeniable. A door where there should be none, in places I knew too well to mistake. In my apartment, on the street I had walked every day for years, in reflections where no door should exist. I never opened it while awake. Something told me that would be different. Something told me it would be real. But one night, when the dream came again, I found myself standing before the door, my hand already on the handle, as if no time had passed between waking and sleeping. And this time, when I stepped through, I did not wake up. The world beyond the door was not like the ever-changing landscapes of my past dreams. This time, it was the corridor itself that had transformed. The walls were no longer cracked and aged. They were smooth, too smooth, as if reality itself had been pressed into something artificial. The dim glow that once barely illuminated the space now pulsed, as though the walls themselves were alive, breathing light in a slow, rhythmic pattern. I turned, instinctively seeking the door behind me, but it was gone. A stretch of unbroken walls stood where it had been, the grain of the wood seamlessly merging into nothingness. My pulse quickened. Had I finally gone too far? A sound, distant but unmistakable, echoed from down the corridor. A soft creak, like footsteps shifting on ancient wooden planks. I wasn't alone. I walked forward, my steps eerily silent, though I could hear the soft fabric of my clothes brushing against me with each movement. The air had a strange weight to it, thick and pressing, like it resisted my passage. The corridor seemed endless, but I pressed on, drawn by an instinct I couldn't explain. Then another door appeared. This one was different. Unlike the old wooden door I had passed through, this was sleek, metallic, reflecting the pulsing light around it like liquid silver. There was no handle, only a small indentation in the center, shaped like a keyhole, but I had no key. A whisper, barely audible, slithered through the space around me. It wasn't a language I recognized, yet I understood it. It has always been here. It has always been waiting. I reached out, pressing my fingers against the keyhole. A sensation rippled through my body, not pain, not warmth, but something in between, as if the door recognized me. The metal softened under my touch, and without warning, it melted away, revealing darkness beyond. I stepped inside. The space beyond was infinite. A sky without stars stretched in all directions, vast and consuming. The air carried a weightless stillness, an absence of sound so complete that my own thoughts seemed intrusive. There was no up, no down, only the sensation of floating, as though I had left behind everything I knew. And then the voice came again. You have seen us before. You have known us in ways your mind cannot hold. And now you are here. Shapes began to emerge from the void, figures that flickered between the familiar and the unknown. Some bore the resemblance of people I had once met, yet their faces held expressions that belonged to strangers. Others were entirely alien, shifting, dissolving, reforming as if made of thought itself. One figure stepped forward, distinct from the others. Its form was fluid, but its eyes, if they were eyes, remained fixed upon me. You opened the door. Now you must walk the path. A path. I looked down, and beneath me, something began to take shape. A bridge, if it could be called that, woven from light, stretching into the infinite. With no other choice, I took my first step. The moment my foot touched the surface, a sensation unlike any I had known rippled through me. Memories that weren't mine surged into my mind, places I had never been, voices I had never heard. And yet I understood them. They belonged to me, or to something I had once been. I walked forward, each step unveiling more of the vast, unknowable space around me. And as I moved, I realized something chillingly familiar. I had been here before. The dream had not been a dream. The door had never been just a door, and whatever lay ahead, waiting at the end of the bridge, was not unknown to me. It had been waiting for me to return. Chapter 5. The Stranger in the Mirror. The dream had changed. It no longer started in the endless corridor, nor with the impossible door that had once defined it. Now I stood in a dimly lit room, the air thick with something unseen yet palpable. The walls stretched upward into darkness too high to make out a ceiling. The floor beneath me felt solid but unfamiliar, as though I had stepped onto something not entirely of this world. At the center of the room stood a single object, a mirror. It was old, far older than the wood and glass suggested. Its surface bore no dust, no imperfections, yet something about it felt worn, as if time itself had left an imprint upon it. The frame, an intricate weave of dark metal, pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat hidden beneath polished steel. I did not want to look into it. Every instinct in me screamed that I shouldn't. And yet, the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. I stepped forward. The reflection met my gaze, but something was wrong. It was me, my face, my eyes, but not entirely. A subtle delay in movement, a flicker of something behind the pupils, a shadow where none should be. Then it spoke. "You are not supposed to be here." The voice was my own, yet laced with something deeper, something that didn't belong in this world. My breath caught. I hadn't spoken. My lips had remained still. The reflection tilted its head, mirroring my shock, but only for a moment. Then it smiled. Not my smile. Not any smile that should belong to a human. The glass rippled, like disturbed water, and the figure within stepped forward, pressing against the barrier between us. My own face staring back at me. But wrong, too fluid, too knowing. The sensation in the air grew heavier, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. Then, with a soundless shatter, the mirror fractured, not outward, but inward, pulling me in. I was falling, or floating, or sinking. I couldn't tell. The world around me was colorless, shapeless, an endless void that stretched in every direction. Yet I was not alone. Figures flickered in and out of existence around me, shadows that moved without sound, their outlines shifting, never fully forming. They watched, their presence pressing against my mind, though I could not see their faces. I was moving towards something, though I had no control over the motion. And then, I saw it. Another mirror, suspended in nothingness, waiting. This one was different. Larger, endless, stretching far beyond what should be possible. And within it, I saw not my reflection, but 1,000 versions of myself. Some were familiar, wearing the face I had always known. Others were not. They bore eyes too dark, expressions too alien, movements too unnatural. Yet each one turned to face me in unison, their gazes locking onto mine. A voice echoed, not from the mirror, not from the figures, but from within me. "You have seen us before, and we have always seen you." The reflections began to move, shifting and overlapping, merging and breaking apart. One stepped forward, distinct from the rest, a perfect replica of myself, except for the eyes. Its gaze was deeper, its presence more solid, as if it were more real than I was. It reached toward the glass, pressing its hand against the surface. My own fingers twitched, drawn by an invisible force. Some part of me knew what was coming next. Some part of me knew this was not just a dream. My hand lifted. My palm met the glass, and I was pulled through. Chapter 6. The house that wasn't there. It began with an address that didn't exist. In the dream, I stood before a house I had never seen, yet something deep inside me recognized it. A strange, creeping familiarity, like a memory long buried but never quite forgotten. The air around it was still, too still, like the world was holding its breath. The house itself was neither grand nor rundown, just ordinary. But that was the problem. It was so painfully unremarkable that it felt unnatural, as if something had built it to blend in, to go unnoticed. But I noticed it. The door was already open. A dark hallway stretched beyond the threshold, disappearing into a depth that made no sense for the house's size. The walls pulsed, not with movement, but with something deeper, an impression of shifting, of rearrangement, as if the house itself was alive in some subtle, imperceptible way. I stepped inside. The door shut behind me, not slammed, not creaked, just closed, silently, absolutely. The floor beneath my feet felt firm but wrong. A half-second delay between movement and sensation, as though I wasn't truly touching it. The hallway stretched longer now, impossibly so, bending where it should not, leading me somewhere unseen. The walls held no pictures, no decorations, just an unbroken expanse of pale, faded wallpaper, its patterns twisting if I looked too long. Then I heard it. A voice, not loud, not whispering, just present. Come further. It wasn't a command, nor an invitation. It was a fact, spoken as if the outcome had already been decided. I walked forward, rooms unfolded before me, each one identical, yet subtly wrong. The furniture was arranged with unnatural precision, as if placed by someone who understood space but not purpose. Chairs that faced corners, a table with no chairs, a bed too wide for the room it occupied. Each space felt like a replica of a real home, but built from memory that had decayed. A staircase appeared where there hadn't been one before. It spiraled downward, vanishing into shadows. I descended. The air thickened, pressing against me like unseen hands. The walls narrowed, the steps beneath me deepened, forcing my legs to stretch further with each movement, slowing me down, as if the house itself wanted to keep me there just a little longer. At the bottom, a door waited. Unlike the rest of the house, it was old, ancient. The wood splintered and aged beyond time. I did not want to open it. Every nerve in my body screamed against it. But I had no choice. I reached out. My fingers barely brushed the surface, and the door yawned open on its own, revealing a vast, empty void. No floor, no walls, just endless black, stretching far beyond what my mind could comprehend. And in that void, something moved. Not one thing. Many things. Eyes blinked open in the darkness, uncountable, and watching. A presence slithered through the unseen space, and though I could not hear it, I felt it. A weight pressing against my thoughts, sifting through them, recognizing me. It whispered my name. I turned to run, but the door was gone. The staircase had twisted, sealing me in. There was no escape, no waking up. I was truly here, trapped in a place that should not exist, inside a house that had never been built. And then I woke up, but I wasn't in my bed. The room was unfamiliar, the walls bare, the air heavy with dust and something else. My breath caught as I turned my head. The house from my dreams surrounded me. The door to the void stood open, and something inside was still watching. Chapter 7. The clock that ticked backward. The dream began as they always did, somewhere familiar yet wrong. I stood in my childhood home, but time had unraveled its edges. The furniture was where it had always been, yet the colors seemed muted, drained of warmth. The walls felt taller, the air heavier, as if memory itself had thickened into something tangible. The hum of the old grandfather clock in the hallway was the only sound. A rhythmic, steady ticking that filled the silence like a heartbeat. Tick, tock. Then, without warning, it changed. Tick, tick. The clock was moving backward. I stepped toward it, compelled by something deep and instinctual. The wood of the clock was darker than I remembered, almost black, as if time had soaked into it like ink. The pendulum, instead of swinging in a slow arc, jerked in strange, uneven movements. The hands crawled in reverse, each second unwinding into the past. Then, the whispering started. Faint at first, barely audible beneath the ticking. A rustling, a murmuring just beyond the range of understanding. I turned my head, expecting to see someone standing in the dim hallway. No one was there, but the clock was still whispering. I leaned in, pressing my ear against the carved wood. The sound sharpened, voices overlapping in frantic, desperate tones. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel their urgency, their pleading. And then, as if sensing my presence, the whispers stopped. The room shifted. I was no longer in my childhood home. The hallway stretched infinitely in both directions, lined with doors that had no handles, no keyholes. The walls pulsed, breathing in slow, deliberate intervals. The only familiar thing was the clock, standing in the center of this impossible space, its hands still crawling in reverse. A door creaked open behind me. I turned slowly. Beyond it was not another room, but something else entirely, a vast, starless void, where figures moved in slow, unnatural motions. I could not see their faces, only the suggestion of their forms, the way their limbs bent at angles that defied nature. They did not step forward. They did not need to. The clock did it for them. With each backward tick, the figures grew clearer, more defined. They were stepping through time itself, drawn forward by the unraveling of moments that should have remained sealed. My pulse pounded in my ears as I turned back to the clock, my fingers trembling as I reached for the face. I needed to stop it. I needed to make it right. But the second my fingers brushed the glass, the ticking stopped. A silence deeper than sound swallowed the space. A weight pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Then the hands of the clock spun wildly, too fast for the eye to follow, reversing through time at an impossible speed. And the figures stepped through. I backed away, my breath ragged. The figures, shadow-like but solid, moved without urgency, yet their presence alone sent a chill through my body. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. They had no faces, no discernible features, just an overwhelming sense of knowing. They weren't ghosts, they weren't people, they were something worse. The walls trembled as if the house itself recoiled from them. The air grew thick with an electric hum, like a storm about to break. The clock's pendulum had stopped, frozen mid-swing, yet time continued to unravel. A voice whispered from within the clock, not spoken aloud, but pressed directly into my mind. You were not meant to see this. The figures stepped closer, their movements slow and deliberate, dragging time itself in their wake. My limbs grew heavy. The air pressed against my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I tried to move, but it was like wading through thick, unseen currents pulling me toward them. No, I gasped. I don't belong here. The largest figure tilted its head. In response, the clock's hands jerked violently forward, spinning out of control. The whispers returned, overlapping voices speaking in languages I couldn't understand, except for one. A single phrase, repeated over and over. Undo the time that was taken. The realization hit me with crushing force. The clock wasn't just reversing time, it was trying to fix something I had done, something I had forgotten. The walls flickered, like images on a broken screen. A memory surfaced, a moment from my childhood that had never felt right. A missing day, a lost hour. A time when I had gone to sleep in my bed but woken up somewhere else, a place I should never have been. And now, time itself was trying to correct it. The largest figure reached out. I flinched, but its hand didn't touch me. It passed through me, into me. My vision blurred, the world folded in on itself, a spiral of light and shadow pulling me backward. The figures did not move, but they were suddenly everywhere, surrounding me without space or distance. I saw flashes of my past, moments I had lived, moments I had forgotten, my first steps, my first words. The day I learned to read. The night I woke up outside without knowing how I got there. The memory of the clock, the moment I had first touched it, and then just as suddenly it stopped. I woke up, or I thought I did. The clock was still there. Not in my childhood home. Not in the dream, but in my bedroom. And it was still ticking backward. Only now I understood what it was undoing. And I was afraid of what would happen when it reached zero. Chapter 8. The mirror that remembered. The dream began like a ripple in water, familiar yet distorted. I stood in my childhood bedroom, staring at the full-length mirror that had always rested against the far wall. The frame was the same aged oak, the glass polished and unbroken, but something about it felt wrong. The reflection held an uncanny stillness, as if it were waiting. I stepped closer. My reflection followed, yet there was a delay, a fraction of a second too slow, barely noticeable, but enough to set my teeth on edge. I raised a hand, and the image in the glass hesitated before mimicking me. A chill ran down my spine. I knew I was dreaming, but the air was thick with something more than illusion. Then, the reflection blinked. I did not. A deep pulling sensation spread through my body, as if the mirror itself were reaching out. My vision blurred. The bedroom behind me faded, swallowed by the mirror's depth, until all that remained was the reflection. And then, just as suddenly, I was on the other side. The air was colder, stiller. The room looked the same, yet off in ways that gnawed at my senses. The furniture sat in the correct places, but the angles were subtly wrong, as if space itself had been rewritten. The walls pulsed, breathing in slow, deliberate intervals. I turned back to the mirror. The reflection was still there, but it was not me. It was someone else. They had my face, my features, but their eyes were hollow, bottomless voids that swallowed all light. The mouth curled slightly, just enough to send a pulse of unease through me. They were studying me the way a predator studies its prey. Then they spoke. "You shouldn't have come back." My stomach twisted. The voice was mine, but layered too many voices speaking at once, each slightly out of sync. I stepped backward, and so did the reflection, but the movement was off, disjointed, broken like a puppet whose strings had been cut and reattached. I had the overwhelming sense that I had done something wrong, that I had disturbed something ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment. The reflection reached toward the glass, and this time, the glass did not hold it back. I turned to run, but the walls of the room had shifted, stretching endlessly into the distance. The door was gone, the window was gone. The only thing that remained was the mirror, and the thing crawling out of it. It was me, but not me. Its limbs unfolded unnaturally, its bones cracking as it pulled itself free from the glass. The face was still mine, but it flickered, twisting through different ages, childhood, adulthood, something older, something not human. Its mouth stretched into a grin that did not belong on my face. It stepped forward. I stepped back. The rules of reality felt loose, bending under forces I couldn't comprehend. The air hummed with static, a soundless pressure filling the space between us. I reached for something, anything, to ground myself, but there was nothing. Only the mirror. Only it. Then, it spoke again. "You left a long time ago." My breath caught in my throat. Left? The words sent a jagged pulse of familiarity through me. Like I had forgotten something. Like I had been here before. No, that wasn't possible. This was just a dream, a nightmare. It had to be. The reflection, my other self, tilted its head, watching me as if it could hear my thoughts. Its grin widened. "This isn't your world anymore." The floor beneath me lurched. I stumbled, my vision fracturing into 1,000 mirrored shards. The air thickened, folding in on itself, the mirror distorted, rippling outward in waves of impossible geometry. My duplicate stepped closer, its fingers stretching toward me, too long, too thin, as if time had warped them. I couldn't move, my body refused to obey. The moment it touched me, my mind splintered, flashes of memory. Faces I didn't recognize, places I had never been. Voices speaking in languages I didn't know, yet understood. The mirror was not just a reflection. It was a door, a prison, a record of everything that had ever looked into it. I saw myself at different ages, watching, waiting. I saw moments from my life that I had forgotten, moments that had never happened. And then deeper, further back, a life that was not mine. Memories of a time before this body, before this world, a being that had stepped through a mirror long ago and forgotten its way back. I had not just fallen into the reflection. I had come home. I had always belonged here. And the other me, the one still in the real world, they had taken my place. I woke up, or I thought I did. The mirror stood in my bedroom, and the reflection was watching me. It smiled, and then it turned away. Walking out of view, I scrambled forward, reaching for the glass, but it was solid once more. The image in the mirror had shifted. It no longer showed my room, it showed theirs. And I knew, without a doubt, that wherever they had gone, I would never follow. Chapter 9. The house that dreamed itself. The house did not exist until I dreamed of it. I did not remember walking to it, nor did I know where I had been before. It was simply there, waiting for me, as if it had always been part of my story. Its wooden beams stretched upward, ancient yet untouched by time. The roof sloped too sharply. The windows were too dark, and the air around it held a stillness that pressed into my skin. I knew I had to enter. As I stepped onto the porch, the wood groaned beneath my weight, not the sound of something old, but something waking up. The door was unlocked, and when I pushed it open, the scent of dust and forgotten things filled my lungs. The walls hummed, faintly breathing with a presence I could not see. I was inside. The hallway stretched longer than the house should have allowed. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects watching me, their eyes shifting when I wasn't looking. The air was thick with memories that were not mine. I reached out to touch the wallpaper, and for a moment it felt like flesh, warm, pulsing with life. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked, but the sound was wrong. It moved backward. I followed the noise, drawn forward by something more than curiosity. The air whispered around me, a voice I could almost understand. The rooms were furnished but lived in by no one. Chairs slightly pulled back, books left open, as if someone had only just set them down. Yet the dust lay undisturbed. The house was remembering. I reached the end of the hallway, where a single door stood ajar. A flickering light seeped through the gap, casting a trembling shadow along the floor. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the doorknob, feeling the pulse of something on the other side. Then the whispering stopped, and the door creaked open on its own. Inside, a study stretched wider than the house itself, an impossible space filled with bookshelves that climbed endlessly into the darkness above. A massive desk sat in the center, papers scattered across its surface. At its edge, an old journal lay open, ink still wet on its pages. I stepped forward, drawn to the words. They were my own. I did not remember writing them, yet each letter curled in the familiar strokes of my hand. I skimmed the lines, my pulse quickening. You are inside the dream again. The house has found you. Do not turn around. My breath hitched. A shadow stretched across the page. I turned anyway. The figure standing behind me was not a stranger. It was me. I did not move. Neither did it. We stood in silent acknowledgement, reflections that had slipped free of their mirrors. Its expression was unreadable, its eyes holding something I was not yet meant to understand. Then it stepped toward me. I stepped back. The house shifted. The air grew heavy. The bookshelves shuddered, pages fluttering, as if caught in an unseen current. My double did not blink. It raised a hand, mirroring the way I had hesitated at the door. This is where you left off, it whispered. Do you remember now? I did not. The journal before me changed, its ink twisting into new words. You have been here before. The house remembers you. I tried to step away, but the floor stretched beneath me, keeping me in place. The shadows deepened, curling around my ankles like hungry fingers. The house was waking up, and it did not want me to leave. The walls trembled, memories bleeding through them. I saw flashes of things I should not have known. A family standing in this very room, their faces blurred, their voices speaking in echoes. A child at the desk, writing words that would never be read. A door that had once been locked, swinging open to the wrong world. I felt the house shifting beneath my feet, rewriting itself as it remembered. The air swelled with something ancient and knowing, something that had waited too long. My reflection, no, the other me, tilted its head. It's time, it said. I did not know for what. The journal changed again, the ink forming its final message. The house is dreaming, and you are part of the dream. The walls around me melted into shadow. The floor dropped away. I felt myself unravel, pulled into the fabric of something older than time. And then I woke up. I sat up in my bed, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. The house was gone. The dream had faded, but on my nightstand, an old journal lay open, and the ink was still wet. Chapter 10. The room that waited. The door was not there before. I was certain of it. I had walked down this hallway countless times in dreams and in waking life, and yet tonight, a door stood at the end where there had only ever been a blank wall. The wood was dark, aged with time, and the brass handle gleamed as if it had been waiting for someone to turn it. For me, a whisper curled through the silence, a voice without a source. It did not speak words. Yet I understood. The door wanted me to enter. It had been waiting. My fingers hesitated over the handle. The air was thick, humming with something just beyond perception. I swallowed hard and pushed. The door swung inward, revealing the room that should not exist. The space inside stretched impossibly wide, its walls flickering like candlelight, shifting between reality and something else. A single chair sat in the center, facing an old desk covered in papers, ink bottles, and a book that lay open but unreadable. The pages moved as if breathing, whispering secrets too quiet to hear. I stepped inside. The air shifted. The door closed behind me without a sound. I was alone. Yet I was not. The chair creaked, though no one sat in it. The ink bottle tipped, spilling black across the pages, forming words that had no beginning and no end. Then the walls shuddered, and the whispering grew louder. The room was waking up. I moved closer to the desk, drawn by the pages that called to me. The ink bled into letters, shifting, forming words I recognized, and yet did not remember writing. You have been here before. A chill ran down my spine. I reached out to touch the paper, and the ink trembled, shifting again. You left something behind. I turned, my breath shallow, searching the room for answers. The shadows stretched and contracted, their shapes unnatural, wrong. The air grew heavy, pressing against my skin. Then the chair moved. It scraped against the floor, as if something unseen had just stood up. I was not alone. The air thickened, the weight of something unseen, pressing closer. I could feel it watching, waiting. My heart pounded, my body frozen between fight and flight. The ink on the pages twisted again. You have been here before. You left something behind, and now it wants you back. The whispering swelled, filling my ears, my mind. I staggered back, the room spinning. The walls flickered, revealing glimpses of something behind them, a space between spaces, shifting and alive. Then the chair toppled over, and something stepped forward. I did not see its form, only the way the air bent around it, the way the shadows recoiled. It reached toward me, fingers of ink and night stretching, curling. You are part of the story. The ink on the pages bled across the desk, spilling over, rushing toward me. The words climbed the walls, seeping into the floor. The room was dissolving into language, rewriting itself around me. The door behind me did not exist anymore. I had stepped too far into the story, and now I could not leave. I gasped as the ink reached me, wrapping around my wrists, my throat, pulling me into the page, into the words, into the story I had forgotten I had written. The room vanished, and I woke up. Or so I thought. The book lay open in front of me. The ink was still wet, and the final words burned in my mind. The room is still waiting. I pushed the book away, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The room around me was unfamiliar, dimly lit, walls covered in bookshelves, filled with volumes I didn't recognize. The air smelled of old parchment and something else, something damp, as though the walls had absorbed more than just knowledge over the years. I turned, expecting to see the door I had entered through, but it was gone. Only bookshelves stood in its place. I rose to my feet, heart pounding. The whispering had not stopped. It had only changed. Now it came from the books themselves, the pages rustling as though something moved within them. I reached for one, a worn leather-bound volume with no title on the spine. As my fingers brushed against the cover, the whispering surged into a single clear sentence. "You cannot leave until you remember." My hands trembled as I pulled the book from the shelf. Its cover was warm, almost pulsing beneath my fingers. I hesitated before opening it, knowing somehow that whatever lay inside would change everything. I turned the first page. My own handwriting filled the parchment. "This is where I left myself." I staggered back, the book slipping from my grasp. The words began to shift, letters rearranging themselves, becoming something new. "The door is still there, but only if you stop looking for it." The meaning pressed against my mind, unfamiliar and yet deeply known. The chair creaked again behind me. I turned slowly, feeling the weight of something unseen settling into the room. The ink on the walls pulsed, rearranging into sentences I could barely comprehend. The book on the desk flipped its pages, faster and faster, words bleeding across them, rewriting themselves with frantic urgency. A choice had to be made. I could close my eyes, let the room reshape itself around me, or I could turn back to the book and find the ending that had been waiting for me all along. I reached for the book once more, knowing that if I read the final line, the story would take me deeper. The ink shimmered, twisting into new words as I traced my fingers over the page. "You never truly woke up." The room shifted, and I felt myself slipping, drawn into the space between words, where reality and dreams blurred together. The whispering became a chorus, voices calling from the walls, the books, the ink itself. The choice was mine, but the story had already begun writing itself around me. And as the final words unraveled in my mind, I realized the truth. I had never left the room. Chapter 11. The House That Remembers. The rain had been falling for hours, a steady rhythm against the roof, muffled by the dense forest surrounding the house. I sat in the armchair by the window, watching the droplets race down the glass, their patterns shifting, dissolving. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards. Something about the night felt different, stretched thin, as if the air itself had been holding its breath. I had never seen this house before, and yet I knew it. Every creaking floorboard, every worn step on the staircase, every book that lined the shelves, this house had been waiting for me. I did not know how I had arrived here, only that I was meant to be here. The familiarity unsettled me, like remembering a dream I had never dreamed. A faint sound echoed through the hallway behind me, a slow, deliberate creak. I turned my head, my breath held tight in my chest. The darkness beyond the doorway seemed deeper than before, stretching endlessly into unseen rooms. I rose from the chair, my fingers brushing against the heavy fabric of the curtains, the texture grounding me in something tangible. The house was watching. I moved cautiously, my footsteps absorbed by the thick wooden planks beneath me. The hallway was lined with paintings, their frames dusted with time. Faces stared from within their confines, unfamiliar yet knowing. My eyes lingered on one, a portrait of a woman dressed in faded lace, her gaze heavy with something I could not name. The plaque beneath her read a name I could not place, yet it felt carved into my memory. The sound came again, this time closer. The air seemed heavier now, thick with a scent I could not name. Old paper, damp wood, something lingering beneath it all. My fingers trailed along the banister as I reached the staircase, the wood worn smooth by time. I hesitated. The house held its breath with me. I descended. The steps did not creak beneath my weight, though I had expected them to. A silence hung between the walls, pressing close. The house was waiting. At the base of the stairs, a corridor stretched forward, lined with doors that had not been there before. Their handles gleamed, untouched. I reached for the closest one, my fingers hesitating over the cool brass, and then I heard it. A voice, low, distant, rising from beneath the floorboards. My pulse quickened. It did not call my name, but it spoke to me all the same. I turned the handle. The door swung inward with a whisper, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by my presence. A table stood in the center, surrounded by chairs that had not been moved in years. Papers lay scattered across the surface, ink faded with age. I stepped inside, drawn to the desk. My fingers brushed against the parchment, and the words shifted beneath my touch. A memory that was not mine stirred. A chair scraped behind me. I turned sharply, but the room was empty. The shadows pooled in the corners, shifting slightly, as though something had just moved out of sight. The air thickened, my breathing slowed. The house was remembering me, just as I was beginning to remember it. I glanced back at the paper. The ink had darkened, words forming that had not been there before. You never left. The breath caught in my throat. The candle on the desk flickered wildly, the flame stretching toward the ceiling before snuffing out entirely. The room fell into darkness, and then I heard it, the sound of footsteps moving toward me, though no one was there. The house had been waiting. I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering in my ears. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. I turned, reaching for the door, but it was gone. The walls seemed closer than before, shifting, pressing in. The whispers began again, soft at first, then rising, layers of voices speaking over one another. I forced myself to turn back toward the desk. The papers fluttered, their ink bleeding, reforming. The words twisted into something new. You are part of the house. I felt the weight of it then, the deep, sinking certainty that I had been here before. Not once, but many times. My hand shook as I reached for the paper again. The ink swirled beneath my touch, reshaping into something even more unsettling. You built this place. The whispers surged, surrounding me, wrapping around my thoughts like vines. My breath hitched, the walls pulsed, shifting like something alive. Then the room fell silent. A single word stood out on the page, stark against the aged paper. Stay. I felt something behind me, a presence, heavy and watching. The air turned cold, a breath against the back of my neck. I turned slowly, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. A figure stood in the darkness, featureless, its form shifting like the ink on the page. It did not move, but I felt its pull, the way the house seemed to hum around it. I stepped back, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk for balance. The figure raised a hand, not a gesture of threat, but an invitation. The ink on the walls bled downward, pooling onto the floor. The ground beneath me softened, the wood warping, bending. The house was changing. It had remembered something, and now it was showing me. I had a choice. I could run, search for a door that might no longer exist, or I could take the hand that was offered to me, and finally remember what the house had been trying to tell me all along. My fingers trembled as I reached forward. The whispers stopped, and then the house exhaled. Chapter 12. The staircase that led nowhere. The house had exhaled, and with it, the air shifted, thick with something unspoken. I had taken the figure's hand, and now I stood at the threshold of a place that did not exist before. The walls groaned as if stretching, reshaping. The wooden panels beneath my feet no longer felt solid, but something softer, something that remembered every step I had ever taken. Ahead of me stood a staircase. It was impossibly long, disappearing into darkness above and below. Its steps were worn, the wood aged and splintered, yet untouched by dust or decay. It did not belong to the house, and yet it had always been here. My fingers brushed the banister, cool and smooth beneath my touch, but as I gripped it, the wood pulsed, alive. The figure had disappeared, or perhaps it had never been there at all. The house was silent now, waiting. I stepped forward. The moment my foot touched the first step, the house inhaled again. The air around me tightened, pressing against my skin. I climbed, each step creaking beneath my weight, though they did not seem to wear down. The staircase coiled upward, stretching beyond my sight. I did not know where it led, only that I had to keep going. I climbed for minutes or hours. Time had begun to fray at the edges. The air grew colder, the darkness heavier. A whisper stirred through the stillness, soft as breath against my ear. "Why did you come back?" I did not answer. The words were not mine to give. A door appeared on my left. It had not been there before. Its frame was warped, the wood aged and splintered, yet the handle gleamed as if freshly polished. I reached for it, my fingers hovering just above the surface. A pulse of warmth radiated from the metal. Inviting, expectant. I hesitated, then turned the handle. The door swung inward, revealing a room that was not a room at all. I stood on the edge of an endless void. The staircase continued within, floating in the abyss. The walls of the house no longer enclosed me. Instead, a vast expanse stretched in every direction, endless and unknowable. A soft glow illuminated the path ahead, but its source remained unseen. The whispers returned, stronger now, weaving through the air like threads of something unseen. "You have always been here." I stepped through the doorway, and the house behind me vanished. The void was not empty. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, shifting, watching. The staircase continued, leading to something just beyond reach. I climbed, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my back. The whispers wove around me, their voices layered, indistinct. The steps changed beneath my feet. The wood darkened, softened, became something else entirely. My hand trailed the banister, and I felt it shift, the texture no longer smooth, but something porous, something breathing. I pulled away, my breath catching in my throat. The staircase led to a landing. A single chair sat in the center, its wooden frame worn and splintered. A mirror stood before it, tall and narrow, its surface clouded with age. My reflection did not greet me. Instead, the glass rippled, shifting like water disturbed by an unseen hand. I stepped closer, the whispers fell silent. The mirror cleared, I saw myself, but not as I was. My reflection was older, hollowed. My eyes carried the weight of something ancient, something forgotten. I raised a hand, and my reflection did the same, but our movements were not the same. A second too slow, a fraction too deliberate. I exhaled, and the reflection did not. "You have been here before." The words did not come from the mirror, but from behind me. I turned sharply, but the void stretched on, empty. When I looked back, my reflection had changed again. The figure in the mirror no longer resembled me. Its face was wrong, its features blurred, shifting. It tilted its head, watching me with an expression I could not name. Then it reached out, a crack split through the glass, jagged and deep. The air grew heavy, the silence pressing. The chair creaked, though I had not touched it. The reflection smiled. Slow, deliberate. "You are not ready to remember." The glass shattered. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. The shards did not fall, they hung in the air, suspended, reflecting fragments of places I did not recognize. A forest bathed in silver moonlight, a door standing alone in an empty field. A house that breathed, its walls shifting like lungs. The staircase beneath me groaned. I turned, but the steps had begun to dissolve, breaking apart into the void. I ran, the banister crumbling under my grip. The whispers rose again, urgent now, layered over one another, in a chorus of voices I could not place. I reached the last solid step. Another door stood before me, identical to the first. My hands shook as I turned the handle, stepping through just as the last of the staircase gave way beneath me. I fell forward, the air shifting. The scent of wood and dust returned. The warmth of a flickering candle, the sensation of something old remembering me once more. I was back in the house. The staircase was gone. The chair remained. The mirror was whole again, yet it no longer reflected anything at all. The whispers faded. The house exhaled. Chapter 13. The Door That Followed. The door was not supposed to be there, yet each time I turned a corner, it was waiting. The old wood bore no marks, no signs of aging, no indication that it belonged to this house or any house at all. At first I ignored it, but no matter how far I walked, how many times I turned back, the door always found me again. The house, once familiar, now stretched in ways it had never before. Hallways twisted impossibly, leading me in circles that never truly met their origin. I could no longer tell where the beginning had been, or if I had ever started at all. Only the door remained constant, standing at the edge of my vision like something watching. Finally, I reached for the handle. The moment my fingers brushed the metal, the air around me thickened, growing dense with something unseen. A distant hum vibrated through the walls, low and steady, like a pulse. The handle was cool, too smooth, too perfect. I hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. And yet the door had followed me for so long, had waited so patiently. I had to see what was on the other side. I turned the handle and stepped through. Darkness swallowed me whole. For a moment I was nowhere. The weight of space pressed against me, pulling at my thoughts. Then, slowly light bled through the void, stretching in thin lines until they formed walls, a ceiling, a floor. I was inside a room. No, not a room, something else, a space that pretended to be a room. The air smelled of dust and old wood, yet the walls were smooth, untouched by time. A single chair sat in the middle, facing away from me. Beyond it, another door stood closed, waiting. I took a cautious step forward. The floor groaned beneath my weight, but the sound was wrong, too deep, too hollow. I stepped closer to the chair. As I did, something shifted in the air, a whisper too soft to understand. I froze. The chair, once still, creaked as if its occupant had just risen, though it was empty. My breath caught in my throat. I was no longer alone. A shadow moved along the far wall, stretching unnaturally, bending in ways it shouldn't. It did not belong to me. The whisper came again, clearer this time, weaving through the stillness like a thread unraveling. You should not have opened it. The words coiled around me, neither a threat nor a warning, just a fact. The shadow lengthened, reaching toward the second door, pulling itself closer. My pulse quickened. I did not move. Then the handle of the far door twisted, the air stilled. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with something unseen. I wanted to turn, to leave, to find the first door again and close it behind me, but I knew somehow that it was no longer there. The far door creaked open. Beyond it the space stretched into blackness, a void that was not empty. The whispers returned, layered over one another, voices I did not recognize, but somehow knew. They called to me, not with words, but with memory. Fragments of places I had never been. A house on a hill with no windows, a forest where the trees bent as if listening, a room with a single chair and a door that always found you. I stepped forward. The shadow moved with me, its edges flickering. The doorway yawned wide, the void shifting, the whispers hushed, waiting. My heart pounded against my ribs. One step, then another. The darkness pulled at me, and I let it, and then I was elsewhere. The door was gone, the room was gone, the house was gone. Only the whisper remained, curling through the nothingness. You should not have opened it. Chapter 14. The Window That Watched. There was a window in my room that had never been there before. I was sure of it. My childhood bedroom had only one window facing the garden, but this one appeared overnight, perfectly framed, seamlessly blended into the wall as if it had always belonged. And yet something about it felt deeply wrong. It was not a window to the outside world. I tried to ignore it at first, pretending it wasn't there. But at night, when the lights were off, I could feel it watching me. Not something beyond the window, no shapes, no figures, no movement, just the window itself, aware of me in a way that glass should not be. Then one evening, I made the mistake of looking into it. Instead of my reflection, I saw my room, a perfect mirror image. But something was off. The air inside the reflection was heavier, almost hazy. My bed was there, my bookshelf, even the tiny crack in the ceiling that had been there since I was a child. Yet it all felt slightly wrong, as if it had been carefully recreated but not truly lived in. And then I saw it, the shadow standing in the corner. It wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, but it was there, waiting. A figure just out of focus, its shape human but not quite right. My pulse quickened. I turned around sharply, expecting to see someone behind me. But my room was empty. When I looked back at the window, the shadow had moved closer. I took a step back. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The figure did not move, did not react, just stood there, watching. A chill ran down my spine. I reached for the curtains, my fingers trembling, and pulled them shut. That night, I barely slept. Even with the curtains drawn, I could feel the presence beyond the glass. The room felt colder. My dreams were restless, filled with whispers I couldn't understand. The next morning, as soon as the sun rose, I decided to cover the window with an old blanket. But when I pulled back the curtains, the window was gone. I let out a shaky breath. Had I imagined it? Had I dreamed the whole thing? My room looked as it always had, undisturbed, unchanged. A part of me wanted to believe it had never happened. But then that night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. A soft tapping, slow, deliberate, coming from the wall where the window had been. My breath caught in my throat. I sat up, my hands clutching the blankets. The tapping continued, rhythmic, insistent, and then, as I stared at the wall, something impossible happened. A faint glow seeped through the paint, outlining a shape I had tried so hard to forget. The window was back, and this time, the curtains were already open. Chapter 15. The house that knew my name. The house had been abandoned for years. Everyone in town knew that. And yet, when I walked past it that evening, something was different. The porch light was on. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the old Victorian structure, its frame warped from years of neglect. The windows, once shattered, now gleamed as if newly cleaned. The door, which had always hung open in decay, stood perfectly shut. A chill ran down my spine. I had walked this route 100 times, always passing the house without incident. But tonight, it felt as though it was waiting for me. Then, the porch light flickered. A single, deliberate flicker, as if acknowledging my presence. I stepped back. The street behind me was empty, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. I told myself to keep walking, to ignore it. But just as I turned away, I heard it. A voice, barely above a whisper. It spoke my name. My entire body tensed. I had not imagined it. The voice had come from inside the house. I should have left. I should have run. But instead, I turned back, my gaze locking onto the darkened window above the porch. Something moved behind the glass, a slow, shifting shadow. The front door creaked open. The invitation was clear. My heart pounded as I stepped forward. The rational part of me screamed to turn around, but my feet carried me toward the porch. The wooden steps groaned under my weight. As I reached the threshold, I hesitated. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with a scent I couldn't place. Not dust, not rot, something older, something unfamiliar. The hallway stretched before me, impossibly long, the flickering glow of candlelight casting shadows that seemed to breathe. I took another step, and the door swung shut behind me. Silence. The house was listening. Somewhere deeper within, a floorboard creaked, followed by the soft rustle of movement. I wasn't alone. I turned my head, scanning the walls, the staircase, the dimly lit corridors leading into further darkness. The house looked lived and furnished, dustless, untouched by time. And then I saw it, a picture frame, hanging on the wall. It was a photo of me, my breath caught in my throat. The image was recent, too recent. My clothes, my hair, exactly as I had looked earlier that day. But I had never been inside this house before. My mind raced for an explanation, but none came. A whisper slithered through the air. "You've been here before." The candlelight flickered. The walls seemed to close in. The whisper came again, closer this time, threading itself through the very fabric of the house. "We remember you." My pulse hammered against my ribs. I turned sharply toward the staircase. At the top stood a figure, still, silent, watching. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A person, but the face was mine. Chapter 16. The dream that spoke back. I had always been a vivid dreamer, but this was different. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a place I had been before. I stood in the middle of a vast, endless field. The grass swayed in slow motion, moving in a rhythm that didn't match the wind. The sky was dark, but not with night. It was empty, void of stars, void of everything, and yet I could see. In the distance, a figure waited. I didn't move toward it, but somehow I was closer. The figure stood with its back to me, tall and still, dressed in something that looked neither old nor new. The fabric shimmered like it couldn't decide if it was real. Then it spoke. "You are not supposed to be here." The voice was mine. A chill crawled up my spine. My breath came shallow and unsteady. I knew this was a dream, but I also knew it wasn't. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask who or what it was, but my voice didn't come out. The figure turned. I was looking at myself. Not a reflection, not a twin. Me, down to the smallest detail. The scar on my wrist, the way my breath hitched when I was afraid. But the eyes weren't mine. They were deeper, darker, filled with something vast and unnameable. "You keep coming back," it said. "Why?" I shook my head. "I don't know." It took a step closer, and though I wanted to step back, my feet wouldn't move. The air around us thickened, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. "Wake up," it whispered. I gasped awake, sitting bolt upright in my bed. My heart pounded, my skin damp with sweat. My room was silent, the familiar outlines of furniture barely visible in the dim light. It was just a dream, except my reflection in the mirror was still asleep. I froze. The blankets were still rising and falling with the rhythm of my breath. My body lay there, peaceful, untouched. But I was standing. I was awake. A whisper threaded through the stillness. "You didn't listen." The air thickened again, and the room darkened. I turned slowly, dreading what I would see. The other me was standing behind me, now. The dream had followed me back. I reached out a trembling hand toward the mirror, unsure of what would happen. My reflection remained still, breathing, but not responding. My fingertips grazed the glass, and it was warm. A sudden pulse rippled through the room, a shift in the air like something vast had awakened. The walls trembled, shadows curling at the edges of the room like living things. The reflection finally moved, but it wasn't me anymore. The face looking back was stretched, wrong, its smile too wide, its eyes black voids that swallowed the dim light. "Not yet," it whispered. The mirror cracked, a sharp pain bloomed in my chest. I staggered backward, clutching at my ribs. The shadows slithered from the corners, curling around my feet, my hands, pulling me toward the mirror. The reflection reached forward, its fingers pressing against the glass, as if trying to break through. The walls pulsed again, and the whispers returned. "We are waiting." I fought against the pull, my heart pounding. The air was heavy, suffocating. I closed my eyes, willing myself to wake up, to escape. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my bed. The room was still, the mirror whole, my reflection normal. But my door was open, and the hallway beyond was no longer my house. Chapter 17. The dream that watched sleep had always been an escape for me, a place where my mind could wander into the bizarre and unexplainable, only to return to reality with the morning sun. But tonight was different. I was aware the moment I slipped into the dream, as if I had been waiting for it. No, as if something had been waiting for me. I stood in a room that was almost familiar, but something was wrong. The walls were lined with bookshelves, yet the books had no titles. The air carried a scent of old paper and something else, something that made my stomach tighten. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I turned, expecting to see a door, a window, anything that could orient me, but there was nothing. Only more bookshelves stretching into the dark. The dim light flickered, casting shadows that moved in ways they shouldn't, elongating unnaturally, twisting as if they had lives of their own. Then I heard it. A whisper, not from behind me, not from beside me, but from within my own mind. "You shouldn't be here." My pulse quickened. The whisper was not a voice I recognized, but it spoke with the weight of something ancient, something that had always existed, just outside my reach. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the endless bookshelves, and then I saw it. A figure stood between the shelves, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall, unmoving, its face hidden in shadow, but I knew it was watching me. I could feel its gaze pressing into me, dissecting me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I wanted to speak, to demand an explanation, but the words caught in my throat. My voice did not belong to me here. I took a slow step forward, my body stiff, unwilling. The moment my foot touched the ground, the figure moved. Not with steps, not with motion. One moment, it was distant. The next, it was closer. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest. The bookshelves around me began to shift, the books sliding from their places, falling soundlessly to the ground. The room was warping, bending, and the whisper returned, louder this time. "Wake up." I turned to run. The bookshelves stretched, curling in on themselves, blocking my path. The figure was closer now. I could almost make out the shape of its face, but something inside me screamed not to look. "Wake up." I squeezed my eyes shut. I willed myself to wake up, to escape this dream. But something cold brushed against my arm. I opened my eyes. The figure was gone. But I was no longer in the room of books. I was somewhere else. A vast field stretched before me, endless and gray beneath a sky that was neither night nor day. The air was silent, still, and in the distance, at the edge of the horizon, stood a single house. A house I recognized. It was mine, but something about it felt off. The windows were dark, hollow. The roof seemed to stretch too high, its angles sharper than they should be. The front door was slightly ajar, as if waiting for me. I didn't want to go inside. Every instinct in my body told me to turn around, to run. But my feet moved forward anyway, drawn toward the house by something I couldn't fight. The whisper followed me, curling around my thoughts like a cold breath. "You have always been here." I reached the front steps. The wood creaked beneath my weight. I placed my hand on the doorknob, feeling the chill of metal against my palm. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, as if the house itself exhaled, the door swung open. Darkness waited inside, and somewhere within it, something was waiting for me. Chapter 18. The Forgotten Name. The dream began like so many others. Or perhaps it had never truly ended. I found myself in a town I almost recognized, where the buildings leaned too close together, their windows dark and hollow. The street beneath me was smooth, untouched by time or footsteps. I could hear nothing. No wind, no distant voices, only the steady rhythmic pulse of my own breathing. And yet, I felt watched. I walked forward because I had no choice. My feet carried me past storefronts that displayed nothing, houses with doors slightly ajar, and alleys that stretched into impossible darkness. I tried to remember why I was here, but my thoughts felt slow, tangled, as though they had been rewritten without my permission. My name, I realized, was slipping from my grasp. I knew I had one. I just couldn't say it. Then I saw the building. It was taller than the others. Its bricks darker, aged in a way that suggested it had always been there. Above the entrance, an old flickering sign bore a single word, home. But I knew, with the kind of certainty that only existed in dreams, that this was not my home. And yet, my hands reached for the door, my fingers pressing against the cool wood. It swung open before I could knock. Inside, a grand staircase led upward into darkness. The walls were lined with framed photographs, but the faces had been scratched away. The air smelled of dust, of paper left too long in a forgotten room. And there, at the far end of the hallway, stood a figure. They were turned away from me, their head tilted slightly to one side. I felt the pull again, the irresistible force urging me forward. My voice caught in my throat as I tried to speak. "Who are you?" But no sound came out. The figure began to move. Not with footsteps, not with motion, but in the way that the dream itself seemed to shift around them. One moment they were at the end of the hallway. The next, they were standing just beyond the first step of the staircase. "Come upstairs," they said, their voice an echo of something I had almost forgotten. I should have run. I should have turned and fled into the empty streets. But instead, I climbed. Each step creaked beneath my weight, the sound swallowed instantly by the silence of the house. The figure moved ahead of me, their shape just barely visible in the shifting darkness. The staircase spiraled higher than it should have, the walls pressing in closer with each step. By the time I reached the top, I could barely breathe. A single door waited for me. The figure stood beside it, their hand resting against the frame. They turned their heads slightly, just enough for me to see the absence where their face should have been. I knew then that I had seen them before, though I could not remember when. And as their hand moved to the doorknob, a whisper filled the air. "You have been here before." The door swung open, revealing a room that should not have existed. A room that was mine. The bed, the desk, the scattered belongings. I recognized everything. But the window was wrong. Instead of the outside world, it looked into another space, another time. A reflection of my own room, only empty. Waiting, the figure stepped inside, vanishing before my eyes. The whisper returned, closer now, curling around my thoughts. "You forgot your name." My heartbeat pounded against my ribs. The air seemed to thicken, pressing down on me. I turned, ready to leave, ready to force myself awake. But the door was gone. And as I stood there, trapped within a place that felt both foreign and familiar, I realized something. I could not remember who I was. Not my name, not my past, not the world I had come from. Only the dream remained. Chapter 20. The door that leads nowhere. The whisper still echoed in my mind as I stepped through the shattered mirror. The air shifted around me, colder, heavier, as if I had crossed into a space that was not meant to be entered. The room behind me, the one I had known, was gone, swallowed by the void. Before me stood the open door, its frame stretching into unnatural darkness. The figure that had once been standing there was gone, or perhaps they had never been there to begin with. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed to turn back, to resist whatever unseen force was drawing me forward. But there was no turning back. The door was the only way. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the world shifted. The room beyond was identical to mine, yet wrong. The bed was slightly out of place. The desk was missing one of its legs, though it somehow remained standing. The walls, painted in familiar colors, pulsed faintly like they were alive, and then the door behind me vanished. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. This was still a dream with rules I did not understand, but a dream nonetheless. I walked toward the desk, my fingers trailing over the surface. The papers scattered across it were different. Not blank, but filled with words I could not remember writing. Pages and pages of fragmented sentences, overlapping thoughts, written in my own hand. And at the bottom of the last page, a single line stood out. "Do not look at the door." My breath hitched. I turned my head slightly, my gaze drawn to the only door in the room, the one that had led me here, the one that should not have existed. It was closed now. Slowly, I stepped back from the desk. The door was not just closed, it had changed. The wood was darker, the handle rusted. Something about it felt aware, like it was waiting, watching. I clenched my fists. I had a choice. I could open it. I could see where it led. Or I could stay. I could wait. Then something knocked from the other side. A slow, deliberate knock. Not hurried, not frantic, just patient. I swallowed hard. I did not move. Another knock, louder this time. The whisper returned, curling around my thoughts. "Do not open it." My breath was uneven now. The knock came again, steady, insistent. The air in the room grew heavy, pressing down on me, thick with expectation. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My hands trembled at my sides. And then the door handle turned. I wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The walls pulsed, the papers on the desk shuddering as if caught in an unseen current. The handle twisted further, the door creaking open just enough for the darkness beyond to spill into the room. A shadow moved on the other side. A voice, so much like my own, whispered through the gap. "Let me in." I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the ground, my body locked in place as the door inched open, revealing nothing but endless black. The whisper grew stronger, pressing into my mind, drowning out my own thoughts. "Let me in." The darkness reached for me. Chapter 21. The Room That Remembers. I did not let it in. Or maybe I did. Maybe the moment I heard my own voice whisper through that door, something shifted, something unseen passed through the threshold. Because even though I forced myself to step away, even though I willed the door to remain shut, the air in the room had changed. I was no longer alone. The knock had stopped. The handle had stilled. The darkness beyond the door remained, stretching impossibly far. But the room was different now. I turned back to the desk, to the scattered papers. The words had changed. "You have always been here." I frowned, reaching for the nearest page. The ink bled as though still wet, shifting under my touch. I tried to read, to make sense of the sentences, but they slipped through my mind like water. The only words that remained burned into my thoughts. "The room remembers." A creak sounded behind me. My breath hitched. The door was still closed, but the feeling of something standing just beyond it had grown stronger. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. I stepped back, but my foot did not meet the familiar wooden floor. The room had changed again. The walls stretched further apart, the furniture shifting subtly, like a living thing caught in slow motion. The bed was against the wrong wall now. The desk had moved closer to the door. The pages that once lay scattered were now neatly stacked. My pulse quickened. This was not just a dream. This was something else. I turned in slow, measured steps, scanning every detail. The air hummed with something unseen, an awareness that made my skin prickle. Then I saw it. A mirror. It had not been there before. Tall and old, its frame warped like melted wax, its glass dark, too dark, absorbing more light than it reflected. I did not want to look into it, but something in the room wanted me to. I took a step forward, my breath shallow. The reflection that stared back at me was almost me. The same face, the same eyes. But they were wrong, too hollow, too knowing. And then my reflection smiled. I did not. The whisper returned, softer this time, curling at the edges of my thoughts. "You do not belong here." I stepped back. The reflection did not move. Something shifted in the mirror's glass, the darkness rippling outward like water disturbed. And from the depths of that void, something else began to emerge. A shape, a figure. Not me. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I turned away, forcing myself not to watch. The walls pulsed again, the pages on the desk rustling as though caught in a breeze that did not exist. The floor beneath me shuddered. Then the mirror shattered. The sound of breaking glass filled the room, but when I turned back, there were no shards, no reflection. Only the empty frame, yawning like an open mouth. And from within, something breathed. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering. The whisper coiled around my mind again, stronger this time, more insistent. Leave. The door behind me creaked open. I didn't want to look, but I had no choice. Slowly I turned my head. The hallway beyond was not the one I had entered through. It stretched endlessly, its walls lined with doors identical to mine. Each one slightly open, each one waiting. The air crackled with something unseen, something old. The whisper returned, not as a voice, but as a feeling that wrapped around my bones. Choose. A single step forward, and the floor groaned beneath me, as though the house itself disapproved. But there was no going back. The mirror was gone. The room had changed. The memory of what had been was slipping away, just like my name had before. I stepped into the hallway. The doors on either side seemed to shudder, as if they sensed my presence. Some were darker than others. Some bore strange symbols I did not understand. One door, further down, stood slightly more open than the rest. A faint glow spilled from the crack. I moved toward it, each step heavier than the last. The whisper followed me, now nothing more than a breath against my ear. You were never meant to remember. I reached the door. My fingers trembled as they brushed against the wood. The glow pulsed once like something breathing behind it. And then I pushed it open. Chapter 21. The Room That Remembers. I did not let it in. Or maybe I did. Maybe the moment I heard my own voice whisper through that door, something shifted, something unseen passed through the threshold. Because even though I forced myself to step away, even though I willed the door to remain shut, the air in the room had changed. I was no longer alone. The knock had stopped. The handle had stilled. The darkness beyond the door remained, stretching impossibly far. But the room was different now. I turned back to the desk, to the scattered papers. The words had changed. You have always been here. I frowned, reaching for the nearest page. The ink bled as though still wet, shifting under my touch. I tried to read, to make sense of the sentences, but they slipped through my mind like water. The only words that remained burned into my thoughts. The room remembers. A creak sounded behind me. My breath hitched. The door was still closed, but the feeling of something standing just beyond it had grown stronger. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. I stepped back, but my foot did not meet the familiar wooden floor. The room had changed again. The walls stretched further apart, the furniture shifting subtly, like a living thing caught in slow motion. The bed was against the wrong wall now. The desk had moved closer to the door. The pages that once lay scattered were now neatly stacked. My pulse quickened. This was not just a dream. This was something else. I turned in slow, measured steps, scanning every detail. The air hummed with something unseen, an awareness that made my skin prickle. Then I saw it. A mirror. It had not been there before. Tall and old, its frame warped like melted wax, its glass dark, too dark, absorbing more light than it reflected. I did not want to look into it, but something in the room wanted me to. I took a step forward, my breath shallow. The reflection that stared back at me was almost me. The same face, the same eyes. But they were wrong, too hollow, too knowing. And then my reflection smiled. I did not. The whisper returned, softer this time, curling at the edges of my thoughts. You do not belong here. I stepped back. The reflection did not move. Something shifted in the mirror's glass, the darkness rippling outward like water disturbed. And from the depths of that void, something else began to emerge. A shape, a figure. Not me. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I turned away, forcing myself not to watch. The walls pulsed again, the pages on the desk rustling as though caught in a breeze that did not exist. The floor beneath me shuddered. Then the mirror shattered. The sound of breaking glass filled the room, but when I turned back, there were no shards, no reflection. Only the empty frame, yawning like an open mouth. And from within, something breathed. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering. The whisper coiled around my mind again, stronger this time, more insistent, "Leave." The door behind me creaked open. I didn't want to look, but I had no choice. Slowly I turned my head. The hallway beyond was not the one I had entered through. It stretched endlessly, its walls lined with doors identical to mine. Each one slightly open, each one waiting. The air crackled with something unseen, something old. The whisper returned, not as a voice, but as a feeling that wrapped around my bones. Choose. A single step forward, and the floor groaned beneath me, as though the house itself disapproved. But there was no going back. The mirror was gone. The room had changed. The memory of what had been was slipping away, just like my name had before. I stepped into the hallway. The doors on either side seemed to shudder, as if they sensed my presence. Some were darker than others. Some bore strange symbols I did not understand. One door, further down, stood slightly more open than the rest. A faint glow spilled from the crack. I moved toward it, each step heavier than the last. The whisper followed me, now nothing more than a breath against my ear. "You were never meant to remember." I reached the door. My fingers trembled as they brushed against the wood. The glow pulsed once like something breathing behind it, and then I pushed it open. Chapter 22. The door that chose me. The door opened too easily. As if it had been waiting, the light from within spilled into the hallway, casting long, shifting shadows that did not belong to me. I hesitated, my breath shallow, every instinct telling me to turn back. But the house did not allow hesitation. The whisper was gone now. No more unseen presence warning me. No more echoes curling at the edges of my thoughts. Only silence. The kind that pressed in from all sides, swallowing the sound of my own breath. I stepped inside. The room was not empty. At first it looked like my childhood bedroom, the details unsettlingly perfect. The bed with the same wrinkled sheets, the desk stacked with forgotten notebooks, the old wooden chair that still wobbled if you leaned too far back. Even the air smelled the same, dusty, familiar, tinged with something unspoken. But the window did not show the outside world. Instead, it revealed another version of the room. A reflection, but not quite. The furniture was the same. The bed, the desk, the chair, but there was someone sitting at the desk. Someone who looked exactly like me. Their back was turned, hunched over the notebooks. Their hand moved, writing something I could not see. My pulse quickened. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I stepped closer, drawn forward by something deeper than curiosity. The figure stopped writing. Slowly, their head turned just enough for me to see their profile. It was me, but not me. The face was too smooth, the skin too still, and the eyes did not belong to a living thing. A hand pressed against the glass, not mine. The other me smiled, lips curling in a way I had never seen on my own face. And then, without moving, without sound, they mouthed words I did not understand. The writing on the desk shifted, the ink bleeding into something else, something moving, shifting. The lights flickered. The chair beside me scraped against the floor, moving on its own. My breath hitched. The figure in the window placed both hands against the glass now, pressing harder, the skin of their palms distorting as though the barrier between us was thinning. And then, crack. A hairline fracture spread through the glass, then another, and another. The reflection distorted, warping, unraveling. The walls trembled around me, the air thickening. The notebook on the desk flipped open, pages rustling violently, the ink bleeding across every line. The words stared back at me, shifting, forming something I could finally understand. "You are in the wrong place." I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering. The cracks in the window spread like veins, reaching outward, closer, closer. Then the glass shattered. A force surged through the room, knocking me off my feet. I hit the floor hard, the world spinning, my vision blurred by the cascade of falling shards. And in the midst of it all, I heard it. Footsteps, not mine, slow, deliberate, moving toward me. I forced myself to move, crawling backward, away from the shards, away from the figure stepping through the broken window. But I had nowhere to go. The door behind me was gone. The air felt heavier, pressing down, distorting everything. My limbs ached, as though something unseen was holding me in place. The footsteps stopped just inches away. I looked up. The other me stood over me now, their face obscured by shifting shadows, their smile too wide, their eyes too empty. They knelt down, tilting their head, studying me the way one might examine something fragile, something breakable. And then they whispered, voice curling into my ears like smoke. "You should not have come here." The room flickered, the walls rippling, reality itself warping around me. My vision blurred. The figure reached out a hand. Darkness swallowed me whole. Chapter 23. The House That Breathed. I awoke to the sound of breathing. Slow, steady, and impossibly deep. It wasn't mine. It surrounded me, filling the air, pressing against my skin like an invisible tide. My head throbbed, my vision blurred, but I was awake. And I was no longer in the room with the shattered window. I was somewhere else. The walls around me pulsed, shifting in and out like the slow rise and fall of a chest. The floor beneath me felt warm, almost alive. I pushed myself up, my palms sinking slightly into the surface before it hardened again. The air smelled of dust and something deeper, something ancient. I turned slowly, trying to understand where I had been taken. The room stretched endlessly in all directions, but there were no doors, no windows, no corners, only walls that curved and bent, as if the house itself was watching me, listening to the rhythm of my breath. The flickering light above cast strange, moving shadows that did not belong to me. I took a step forward, and the walls exhaled, a deep groan reverberating through the space. I wasn't alone here. A sound echoed from somewhere beyond the shifting walls, a rhythmic tapping, deliberate, patient. It wasn't footsteps, it wasn't knocking, it was something waiting. I had no choice but to move. With careful steps, I walked toward the sound, feeling the floor stretch and shift beneath me like muscle, like something shifting in its sleep. The walls pulsed with each breath, the air growing heavier with each step. I could see now. There was something ahead of me, a doorway that hadn't been there before. A narrow frame leading into nothingness, the space beyond it swallowed in darkness. The tapping stopped. I hesitated. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to stop moving, to close my eyes and wake up. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't a dream I could escape so easily. I stepped through the doorway. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. The walls around me were no longer breathing. They were listening. Rows of doors stretched out before me, each identical, lining an impossibly long hallway. Each door was numbered, but the numbers didn't make sense. Some were backward, some were upside down, others seemed to shift the longer I looked at them. Then I saw it. One door at the far end, different from the others. It wasn't numbered, it wasn't marked. But I knew it was meant for me. I walked toward it, the sound of my own footsteps muffled against the heavy air. The closer I got, the more the space around me seemed to distort, bending and warping, the doors on either side stretching taller, their handles twisting like reaching hands. By the time I reached the door, my breath was shallow, my chest tight. I placed my hand on the knob, expecting it to be cold. But it was warm. Too warm. I turned it slowly. The door swung open, revealing a space that should not have existed. Inside was not a room, but an endless shifting landscape of staircases leading nowhere, of hallways that twisted and turned upon themselves. The air smelled of dust and old memories, and in the center of it all, standing perfectly still, was a figure. They were waiting for me. Their back was turned, but I knew if they turned around, I would recognize their face. I would know exactly who they were. I stepped forward, and the house exhaled again, a slow, shuddering breath that rippled through the walls. The figure did not move, and then without turning, they spoke. "You shouldn't be here." Chapter 24. The figure in the mirror. I did not speak. I did not move. The figure before me stood motionless, their head tilted slightly downward, as if listening to something I could not hear. The air around us felt thick, dense, charged with something unseen. The walls of the house had stopped breathing, but I could feel its presence pressing in from all sides. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure did not answer. Instead, they raised one trembling hand and pointed toward the farthest wall of the endless shifting room. A mirror stood there, its frame warped and aged, its surface rippling as though it were made of water. I knew, without understanding how, that I was supposed to approach it. I took slow steps forward, my heart pounding in my ears. The mirror did not reflect the room I stood in. It showed something else, something I recognized immediately, but wished I hadn't. It showed my childhood home. The hallway was exactly as I remembered it, down to the flickering overhead light and the scuff marks along the wooden floor. But there was something wrong. The house was too still, too silent. The door at the end of the hallway, the door to my old bedroom, was slightly ajar, a faint light spilling from within. I reached out, fingers hovering over the mirror's surface. It felt neither cold nor warm, but it pulled at me, like a whisper just at the edge of my thoughts. The figure behind me did not move, did not make a sound, but I could feel them watching. I pressed my palm against the glass. The world shifted, a rush of air, a weightless moment of falling, and suddenly I was inside the house. The mirror was gone. The hallway stretched before me, familiar yet wrong. The door to my old room stood open, waiting. I took a step forward. The floor creaked beneath my weight, but the sound was swallowed by the silence. I reached the doorway and hesitated. The room beyond was filled with shadows, the light flickering unnaturally, casting shapes that did not belong. I stepped inside. The air changed. The temperature dropped, and then the whispering began. Not words, not voices, just the sound of something shifting in the darkness, circling me, unseen but present. My gaze swept the room. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The bed with its familiar creased sheets, the old wooden desk, the small lamp that had once comforted me in the night. But there was one thing that did not belong. A mirror stood in the corner, identical to the one I had stepped through. And in its reflection, I saw something impossible. I saw myself, but my reflection did not mimic my movements. It stood still, staring at me, unblinking, unmoving. A moment stretched between us, heavy and unbearable. Then it stepped forward. I staggered back, but the reflection moved closer, pressing against the inside of the glass. Its lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, its mouth stretched wider, an unnatural silent scream that made my skin crawl. The whispering grew louder. The air around me thickened, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. My reflection raised its hand and placed it against the mirror's surface. The glass shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. I gasped, reaching out, trying to find something solid, something real. But there was nothing. Only the sensation of falling, of being pulled somewhere deeper, somewhere I was not meant to go. And just before the last sliver of light faded, I heard it. A voice, whispering my name. Chapter 25. The dream that became reality. The world around me was a void, yet I was not alone. I felt weightless, as if suspended between sleep and waking, drifting through a place where time had no meaning. The voice that had whispered my name still echoed in my mind, but it was not a sound, it was something deeper, something that resonated in my very bones. Then suddenly, I was somewhere else. I was in my bedroom, but not my bedroom as it was now. This was the past. I recognized the soft glow of the nightlight near the bed, the way the posters on the wall had been arranged, the familiar weight of the blanket over my legs. The world outside my window was frozen in twilight, neither day nor night, a place suspended in between. I sat up, my breath steady, my heartbeat calm, despite the unnatural stillness in the air. I knew something was wrong, but I also knew, somehow, I had been here before. This was a dream, and yet it was real. The door to my room creaked open. I held my breath. A shadow stretched across the floor, shifting, morphing, never quite settling into a form I could recognize. It stood there, just beyond the threshold, as if waiting for something. My skin prickled, but I did not move. Then the whisper came again. "It's time." The words slithered through the air, curling around me like invisible tendrils. The shadow stepped forward, and as it did, the entire room seemed to breathe. The walls rippled, the ceiling stretched upward into a sky filled with endless starless blackness. My bed was no longer beneath me, my feet no longer touching solid ground. I was falling, not downward, but into something deeper, something unseen. And then I was standing in a forest. The scent of damp earth and pine filled my lungs, grounding me. The trees towered above, their gnarled limbs twisting in unnatural ways, as if they had grown according to rules not of this world. The path ahead of me was faint, overgrown, but I knew it led somewhere important. I took a step forward. The sound of my foot pressing into the soft earth felt louder than it should have. The whispering returned, coming from the trees, the wind, the space between my thoughts. "You have been here before." I didn't remember, and yet I did. A figure emerged from the shadows between the trees. It was not a stranger, it was me. My reflection, my double, stood there, watching. But this version of me was wrong. Its face was too still, its eyes too dark. It didn't breathe, didn't blink, and yet when it spoke, the voice was mine. "This is where it happens," it said. "Where you wake up, or where you don't." A sudden wave of dizziness hit me. The ground tilted, the trees wavered like reflections on disturbed water. I tried to step back, but my reflection stepped forward in perfect synchronization. The space between us shrank until there was no space left at all. And then I woke up. But I wasn't in my bed. I was in the forest. The realization hit like a physical blow. I reached up, grasping at my arms, my face, trying to convince myself that this was still a dream. But the chill in the air, the rough bark beneath my fingertips, the damp scent of the soil, everything was too real. A sound behind me, a low hum, vibrating through the trees. I turned slowly. The figure was still there, but it was no longer me. It had changed, shifting into something else. Something that had been watching all along. Its head tilted slightly, as if considering me. Then, without a sound, it opened its mouth, and the world unraveled. Chapter 26. The Unfinished Dream. I did not wake, I did not fall asleep. I existed in between, caught in a moment that stretched infinitely in both directions. The figure before me, the thing that had once been my reflection, stood motionless, its mouth still open, as if caught mid-breath, but no sound came. No words. Only the sensation of something pulling at the edges of my mind, unraveling the seams of reality, one thread at a time. The world was changing. The forest around me blurred, its trees melting into shadows, its sky deepening into something that was neither night nor day. The ground beneath my feet trembled, shifting as though I were standing on something alive. My pulse slowed, each beat a distant echo in a body that no longer felt like mine. I turned away from the figure, or perhaps it turned away from me. It was hard to tell where I ended and where it began. The path before me was no longer a path at all, just an endless stretch of space that bent in ways my mind struggled to comprehend. And yet I knew I had to move forward. There was no other choice. The whispering returned, not from the figure, not from the trees. This time, it came from the very air, swirling around me, sinking into my thoughts, speaking in a voice I recognized but could not name. "You have to finish what you started." I wanted to ask what that meant, but my voice had been taken from me. My lips parted, but no sound emerged. The figure behind me watched, waiting. I could feel its gaze, empty yet knowing, as if it held a truth I had long forgotten. Then, the world shifted again. A door appeared before me, standing alone in the nothingness. Its frame was old, its wood warped and cracked, but the handle gleamed as if untouched by time. I reached for it, hesitation tightening in my chest. I knew that if I opened this door, there would be no going back. And yet some deep part of me understood. I had already crossed the threshold long ago. My fingers closed around the handle. It was warm. The whispering stopped. I pushed the door open. Darkness met me on the other side, thick and endless, but within it, I could see shapes shifting, memories forming, and dissolving like mist. I stepped inside. The door vanished behind me, sealing my fate. I was no longer in the forest. I was no longer anywhere I recognized. I was in the dream that had never ended. A dim glow flickered in the distance, barely perceptible, but I felt drawn to it. With careful steps, I moved forward, the air thick and heavy, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. The closer I got, the more the light pulsed, breathing in sync with something unseen. Shadows twisted along the edges of my vision, figures barely formed yet eerily familiar. I could hear my own heartbeat now, slow and steady, as if it belonged to someone else. Then the whisper returned, but this time, it wasn't outside of me. It was inside my head. "You are close." Close to what? I wanted to ask, but again my voice did not belong to me. I pressed on, the light ahead growing stronger, shifting from a distant glow to something tangible. It was not a single source of illumination, but many flickering like dying embers in the void. And within them, I saw glimpses of places I knew, places I had been before, my childhood home, my old school, the streets I used to walk at night. They were pieces of my past, fragmented and scattered, rearranging themselves into something incomprehensible. I reached out, my fingers brushing against one of the lights. The moment I touched it, the world around me shattered. I was standing in my old bedroom, but something was wrong. The air was stale, unmoving. The bed was perfectly made, untouched, as if no one had ever slept in it. The window was open, but there was no breeze. The door was ajar, and beyond it the hallway stretched on endlessly, far longer than it should have been. A sound, a creak, soft but unmistakable. I turned, and there, in the reflection of the mirror across the room, I saw something move. But it was not me. It was watching. My reflection did not mimic my movements. It stood still, staring at me with eyes that were too dark, too deep, and then slowly, it smiled. The reflection raised its hand and gestured toward the door, its fingers curling inward in a beckoning motion. My breath caught in my throat. I knew I should not listen. I knew I should not follow, but my feet moved on their own. I stepped toward the hallway. The door creaked open wider, revealing nothing but an abyss of endless corridors, twisting and turning in impossible ways. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, and then the whispering grew louder. "You have to finish what you started." The moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. The air grew thick, pressing in on all sides. The hallways stretched and twisted, leading me deeper into the unknown. My reflection's laughter echoed around me, growing distant yet ever present. I had entered the dream, but would I ever wake up?